China is no longer approving coal power plants. It's moving away from coal. Coal is finished, and it only has a few years remaining. The data is here. We have the numbers. And these numbers show a critical change, one that Tony Seba predicted, and one that now is inevitable. China is about to build the world's largest solar farm, which will power more than 2 million homes. A solar farm that'll be even larger than that will be built here in Australia over the next 5 years. Companies are building these new solar farms and backing them up with enormous batteries at the fastest pace in human history. A lot of people still believe that China is going to keep buying the coal from the West. We obviously mine a lot of coal here in Australia. In fact, I live at Australia's largest coal port. And a lot of people here, their lives depend on coal. And they honestly believe that China's like, yeah, we're going to build more coal power plants. We're going to keep on building them and keep on buying more coal. And everything's going to be fine. And everyone's jobs are going to stay the same. But that's not actually true. We have the statistics that show that China has basically stopped approving new coal power plants. We know that last year, approvals for coal power plants fell by 92%. Over the first 9 months of this year, 86% of all power added to the Chinese grid was renewable energy. Here are the actual facts. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Great to have you with us. Now, speaking of solar, right now I'm charging a Cherry EV. It's called the E5. And yeah, I'm charging it purely from solar for my roof, nothing else. The solar on my roof is actually generating right now around 18 kilowatts of power, which is massive, right? So anyway, you should get solar on your roof. That's what I'm telling you. If you don't have it, absolutely you have to get it. It's so good now. It's so efficient now. It's so much better than what it was, say, 5 years ago. And the systems now being installed are really much bigger on average. In fact, the average solar system being installed now in Australia is 10 kilowatt. So I'll put a link in the description to the company I use, they have the best reviews. Getting to this news story here. China has installed 210 gigawatt worth of renewable energy. Thank you to reneweconomy.com.au for sharing this story. There is data on this from the Chinese government, but they had to translate it all. First 3 quarters of 2024, China installed 210 gigawatts of renewables. That's an increase of 21% versus last year. 21% growth. And that means that 86% of all new power capacity added this year has been purely renewables. So how much of that was solar and wind? Well, most of it was solar. 161 gigawatts of solar were added to the grid by Chinese companies, power companies, and the government. These numbers don't include household installations of solar, which, to be honest, it doesn't happen that often in China like it does in Australia. An additional 39.1 gigawatts worth of new wind power, 7.97, so let's say 8 gigawatts of new hydropower, and 1.37 gigawatts of new biomass power rounded out the new capacity added in 2024. So you can see here, 161 gigawatts of solar versus 39 gigawatts worth of wind. So 4 times as much solar was installed. In fact, a bit more than 4 times as much solar as the amount of wind that was installed. Keep in mind, the wind turbines that are installed in China these days, they're not small ones that you see here in Australia, or a lot of the ones in the US are not, when I say small, they're big, but they're small in comparison to what we're seeing in China. Most of the wind farms being built in China are using enormous wind turbines that are literally bigger than football fields. They are astronomically large. Just the blades themselves are way bigger than a football field. So these wind turbines are extremely efficient, but clearly the Chinese government believes solar is actually cheaper. And the truth is, it is cheaper. Solar is actually significantly cheaper than wind. But of course, there's no solar in the middle of the night and there is wind. So that's the reason that the Chinese government has decided that they need wind power because it balances the intermittency of solar. Now keep in mind that China is installing batteries to back up all these renewables and to absorb all the extra renewables. They are installing batteries at a record pace. Part of the reason for that record pace is that batteries have never been cheaper. They are so cheap now. And obviously, most of the world's battery companies are located in China. meaning it just makes total sense. As a result of all the new renewables being added to the grid, it means that most coal power plants are running at a loss. The Chinese government has revealed that about 70% of all coal power plants in China are running at a loss. Therefore, quite a number of them are closing down. Keep in mind, these are the numbers. Coal power plants must be running at a minimum of 70% capacity. If they don't, this is the average industry-wide, if they don't run at 70% capacity, they lose money. And 70% is hard to do. It's harder than you think because during the middle of the day, all the renewables come online, particularly solar. That means, between, say, the peak 9 o'clock in the morning, even earlier, until around 5 o'clock in the evening, all of the solar is going into the grid, and these coal power plants, they have to be basically turned off in China. The Chinese government doesn't want you running a coal power plant if it doesn't need to be running. There's already too many emissions in China. Basically, the Chinese government are trying to clean the air up. They're very well aware that coal is making their citizens sick. It is. The Chinese government knows, like the American government knows, the data on this. A study was done recently in the United States. This study said 22 million people died prematurely over a 20-year period as a result of coal dust from coal power plants. If you live within a 100-mile radius of a coal power plant, you are at risk and you will die most likely prematurely if you are within that radius. So my suggestion is move the hell away as fast as you can, unless it's closing down. Then you'll be okay. At the end of 3 quarters this year, China's renewable energy generating capacity had reached 1.73 terawatts, a year-on-year increase of 25%. So the reason that those numbers don't add up, do they? I mean, China's amount of solar they've added is 21%, but the increase is 25%, and that's partly because of the batteries being added to the grid. Essentially, you add a battery, and now you can use more of the solar that you were partly wasting. So renewables increased by 25%. But what all this means is that China has actually installed more solar than the rest of the world combined this year. More than the rest of the world combined. And at this point in time, it's now cheaper to install a solar power plant and add battery backup than it is to run a lot of these coal power plants. Now remember, China doesn't want to buy Australian coal. China doesn't want to buy coal from anywhere. Most coal that China uses is from outside of China. Do you think China likes buying coal and all this other stuff from other countries outside of the country? Hell no, it hates doing this. It will be getting rid of these coal power plants as quickly as it can in order to use what? Create its own energy. Do you think China likes that imbalance where it's having to buy a bunch of shit outside of the country? No, it hates this stuff. So if you work in the coal industry, it's time, I'm telling you, it's time to find a new job. Like I said, coal power plants are no longer being approved in China. There's numerous articles confirming this has happened, right? It's finished. Coal's done. If you've got a job in this industry, you've got maybe 5 years before you'll be losing it. I'm telling you, it's about to collapse. This collapse is going to be astronomical. We've seen bankruptcies in the United States. Some of the biggest coal producers in the world. Demand will radically decline over the next 10 years because remember, it's not just China adding all this renewables. It's also many other countries around the world. Record-breaking numbers of renewables being installed over the last 9 months this year. The first 9 months of this year, just records being broken in numerous different countries. Whether some places it's wind, some places it's solar, some places it's California. They go and add a bunch of batteries and they get way more utility out of their existing solar. This is not going to change. Batteries are being installed at a record pace. Look at Tesla's numbers now. You want to go buy a big battery from Tesla, right? And Tesla's, even though they have a mega factory in China about to open, there's still a 2-year delay. 2 years. I mean, Tesla can't build them fast enough. Tesla's installation of batteries this year has doubled versus last year. And they have a 2-year backlog. So what that tells us is that renewables are actually taking over. As the cost has come down, the cost to manufacture those batteries continues to fall, the cost to operate them, and they also are lasting longer. Look at the numbers coming from CATL. They're guaranteeing that their batteries will last for 1.6 million kilometers with a minimum of 80% capacity. You can imagine for energy storage purposes just how much longer they'd last. Guarantees from these companies now are a minimum of 25 years. In the past, it was a 10-year guarantee on a battery, and governments were like, that's a lot of money, that's a bit of a risk. That risk has been eliminated. Coal is in its final death throes. People just don't realize. They're just like not adding up the numbers. They're looking at yesterday and deciding based on what happened yesterday, what's going to happen today. But if you look a couple of years into the future, this is going to change. And the pace of change will be so fast that many companies won't see it coming. There'll be bankruptcies left, right, and center. I'm telling you right now. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. Thanks for watching.